Claressa Shields is the most feared woman in boxing, and by the time you finish this video, you are going to see exactly why that fear has nothing to do with a punch anymore. It has to do with a family, a funeral, a security guard, a missing preacher, and a story so ugly that even her own blood ran to a live stream to burn it all down. Hey, and before we plunge into the deep end of this mess, shout out to every single one of you tuning in on your Friday, because for the sad little hype house cheerleaders we are about to expose today, we are going to need everybody standing shoulder to shoulder. So do me one favor, tap that like button because I want the Claressa cleanup crew to see the number, and I want them to know we are not backing down from a single word of this. And listen, while you are down there, subscribe if you haven't yet, because what is coming in the next few weeks around Claressa Shields, Papoose, Briana, Shalita, and this entire fractured empire is going to be the story of the year in combat sports, and you are not going to want to miss a beat. Now let me put the picture together for you, because when you see the way the pieces line up around Claressa Shields, you are going to be shocked at how obvious this has been the entire time. Look, we all watched Claressa build a legacy. Two-time Olympic gold. Undisputed champion in more weight classes than most people can name. First woman to ever win the ESPY for Best Boxer back in 2023. And now, in 2026, Claressa Shields is nominated again for Best Fighter, standing shoulder to shoulder with Terence Crawford, Gabriela Fundora, and UFC lightweight Justin Gaethje. That is a resume most fighters would trade their firstborn for. But here is where the wheels come off the story, because behind every gold medal and every belt, there is a family that has quietly been screaming into the void, and this week, one of them finally picked up a phone, hit go live, and let the whole planet hear it. Her name is Briana, Claressa Shields' younger sister, and the video that dropped from her live stream is not a diss track, it is not a rap beef, it is not some petty online spat. It is a real-life autopsy of what happens when money lands in the wrong hands. Because according to Briana, the Queen of the Ring left her stranded in Flint, Michigan, canceled her flight, tossed her suitcase out of a moving vehicle situation, and did it all while their great-grandmother lay in a funeral home their own family barely wanted to attend. Now, if that sounds unreal to you, buckle up, because the layers on this thing are somehow even worse than the headline. And every one of them points back to the same person, Claressa Shields. Here's the thing. This is not the first time Claressa Shields has been accused of weaponizing a funeral. Roll the tape back to Tony Rich's cousin, Kendra. Watchers of these updates already know the name. When Tony Rich lost his cousin, Claressa allegedly stepped forward to pay for the funeral service. According to Kendra, the second the champ arrived, the energy in the room turned toxic. Daggers in the eyes, cold shoulders, whispers behind the folding chairs. And then, when the dust settled and the invoices came due, the story we are hearing is that the two-time Olympian did not actually pay for that funeral at all. She sat in the front row calling shots she never bought. That is not just a bad look. That is a receipt. And now, 2 years later, the exact same pattern has resurfaced. Only this time the person locked outside the funeral home is her own sister, Shalita, and the person on the other side of the door pulling the strings is Claressa Shields herself. Look, I am going to say something that might make a few people mad. Money does not give you morals. It does not give you common sense. And it sure as hell does not give you the right to tell a grown woman she cannot say goodbye to her own grandmother. That is the line she crossed this week. And that is the line her own sister Briana refused to let her hide from. Because when Shalita walked up to that funeral home doorway, ready to see her grandmother one final time, according to the family, it was Claressa's own security guard who stepped in front of her and blocked the way. That is right. Private security detail. At a family funeral. In Flint, Michigan. For a woman who died at 90 years old of natural causes. Not scandal, not violence, not headlines. Just age. And she decided that even at a moment that's sacred, she was going to be the one holding the clipboard at the velvet rope. Tell me you have ever heard of anything more cold-blooded than that. But here is where it gets uglier, and this is the part that hit me the hardest when Briana spilled it. According to Briana, Shalita eventually shoved past that security guard, made her way inside, said her goodbye, and left within minutes. Not because she wanted to leave, but because there was nothing left to stay for. Why? Because the funeral for their great-grandmother, a woman who lived 9 full decades on this earth, did not even have a preacher. Let that land. No pastor. No eulogy from the pulpit. No hymn from a choir. Just an usher speaking for a few minutes over a woman who raised a family that raised a champion. Now this champion, we are told, discounted the entire funeral bill down to something like $1,500 against a $5,000 arrangement, and even that reduced total came at the price of a bare-bones service. Meanwhile, this is the same fighter who signed a contract worth $3 million at signing. The math is not matching, and the family knows it. Now, with all the pieces on the board, ask yourself this. If you had $3 million in the bank, and your great-grandmother, the matriarch of the family, passed away at 90 from nothing but time, would you skip the preacher to save a couple $100? Or would you understand that this is the one moment in a family's life where you spend whatever it takes to send her off with the dignity she earned? Because that answer tells you everything you need to know about Claressa Shields and the values she is operating on right now. And Briana, on that live stream, said the quiet part out loud. She said her sister does not like anyone telling her she is wrong. Not her sister. Not her cousin. Not her aunt. Not her own reflection in the mirror. And when Briana tried, on the drive to the airport, to say what needed to be said, her answer was to put her sister's suitcase out of the car and drive off. Look, we can debate all day about who paid for what and who owes whom. But when your sister has to catch a Greyhound bus out of your hometown because you canceled her flight, that is not a family disagreement anymore. That is abandonment with a receipt. And Briana, to her credit, said it plainly. She said she quit her job to come to that funeral. She said she left her kids behind to come to that funeral. She said she flew into Flint the day before, arrived at 5 in the morning, and did every single thing a sister is supposed to do. And the reward? A locked door for Shalita, a suitcase on the curb for Briana, and a $1,300 rebooked flight that the champ somehow found the money for while shorting the preacher at their own grandmother's service. Now, with all the pieces on the board, tell me that sits right with you. Because it sure as hell does not sit right with me. And here is where the Claressa Shields story really starts to fold in on itself. Because if you have been paying attention, you already know Shalita has been telling this exact story for months. Shalita warned everyone. Shalita said Briana was struggling in Atlanta. Shalita said the boxer was going to end up with the kids. Shalita said something is off with the whole family. And every time Shalita opened her mouth, the Team Claressa machine spun into gear. Yes men on the timeline. Money soldiers in the comment section. Managers, publicists, promoters. The whole yes man choir told us Shalita was bitter, unreliable, a hater. Well, guess what? This week, Briana just co-signed everything Shalita ever said. And she did it while sitting in a car in Flint, holding food that had been knocked out of her hand by a security guard she never asked for. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And the pattern is Claressa Shields. Now let me pull the camera back for a second, because you have to understand what is really happening here. Claressa Shields is standing on the biggest stage of her career, the 2026 ESPYs. A second Best Fighter nomination. A $3 million contract. A new imprint called WYNN Records, with her husband Papoose out here announcing they just broadcast their first full boxing event through the WYNN Records network. Live from Puerto Rico. Papoose is on socials flexing chains and calling Claressa Shields his queen. She has a defense against Kaye Scott coming at State Farm Arena in Atlanta on August 15th on DAZN. On paper, this is the peak. This is the moment every athlete works their entire life to reach. And yet, the same week she is being crowned by ESPN, she is being burned to the ground by her own sister on a live stream that has already sent shockwaves through boxing Twitter. Look, that is not a coincidence either. That is what happens when the empire outgrows the family that built it. That is what happens when the yes man choir gets louder than the blood in the room. And she is finding out, in the ugliest way possible, that money can silence a lot of things. But it cannot silence a sister who has already lost too much to be scared of losing anything else. Now let me get to the part that a lot of people are going to skip past because they are too busy arguing about who yelled first on the live. Briana said something on that stream that should have stopped every single viewer in their tracks. She said, and I quote the sentiment, she does not call Claressa Shields for herself. Ever. She calls Claressa for the kids. She calls her sister for gas money. She calls her for groceries. She calls her for bills. And even then, the queen of the ring will hand over just enough for the kids. and not 1 cent for the woman raising them. Now think about that. 2 Olympic gold medals, a $3 million signing bonus, a recording imprint, a boxing network, and she buys cars for her assistant Peanut, cars for someone named Tiffany, and only after all of that does she circle back to her own sister with a set of tires. That is not generosity. That is a hierarchy. And in Claressa Shields' hierarchy, her own blood is somewhere near the bottom. Now with all the pieces on the board, let me follow the money for you, because this is where the story stops being just family drama and starts being business. Papoose is out here in 2026 rebranding a whole boxing network in his own image. WYNN Records used to be a boutique rap imprint. Now, if you believe the announcements, it is a full-service boxing broadcast network, hosting live events out of Puerto Rico, cross-promoted through DAZN, and stamped on every chain Papoose wears in a mirror selfie. That is not a hobby. That is an infrastructure play. And infrastructure plays cost money. Real money. The kind of money that has to come from somewhere. And the somewhere, according to what Shalita has been telling anyone who will listen for months, is the exact $3 million bag that Claressa signed for. So when Briana says her sister put her suitcase out of the car and then complained about the price of a rebooked flight, you are not just watching sibling pettiness. You are watching a woman who has been told over and over again that every dollar in the household is already spoken for by a network she may not even own her fair share of. And Papoose, meanwhile, is on Facebook typing paragraphs about how he has never ghostwritten for anybody, thumping his chest, and telling the world he refuses to argue. The receipts say otherwise. The receipts always say otherwise. Here's the thing that I cannot let go of. Briana said her daughter, a child, was so protective of her that if she ever heard someone bad-mouthing her mama, she would run her little mouth right back. That was Briana laughing through the pain. But listen closely, because what she was really telling you is that her kids see it. Her kids see how their aunt treats their mother. Her kids see the food knocked to the floor. Her kids see the suitcase on the curb. Her kids see the security guard step in front of Grandma Great-Granny's coffin. Kids do not forget those images. And one day, when those kids grow up, Claressa is going to find out that legacies do not just live in the record books. They live in the memories of the people you refused to feed at the dinner table. Now let me hit you with one more layer, because this is the moment the mask really comes off. Remember that younger brother nobody could find at the funeral? For a minute, Shalita told us he did not even show up. Then Briana let it slip. He was babysitting the kids. Claressa's younger brother, who had every right to say goodbye to his own great-grandmother, was reportedly assigned childcare duty because the champ would not trust anyone else to watch the kids. Not an aunt, not a family friend, not a licensed sitter. Just her little brother, exiled from a funeral so she could keep control of the room. That is not protection. That is puppet strings. And that is the exact same energy that stopped Shalita at the door. Now with everything on the table, I have to ask you this straight. What kind of person turns a great-grandmother's funeral into a boxing weigh-in with badges at the door? What kind of person cancels a sister's flight home and then complains about the cost of the rebook? What kind of person shortchanges the preacher out of the service so an usher has to fill the silence? Because from where I am sitting, that is not the story of an Olympic champion. That is the story of someone who confused a title belt with a moral compass and lost both in the process. And Claressa, if any part of your team is watching this, and I know some of you are, understand something. You cannot ESPY your way out of this. You cannot press release your way out of this. You cannot pay Papoose to post another chain photo and pretend the world did not just watch your sister eat food off her own lap in the front seat of a car you drove her out of. Look, I want to be fair. Every family has drama. Every family has secrets. Every family has that one holiday nobody wants to talk about at Thanksgiving the next year. Nobody is asking her to be a saint. But there is a canyon of difference between family drama and family cruelty, and what Briana laid out this week was cruelty with a paper trail. It was cruelty with a security guard's name attached to it. Carlos or Fraser or whichever name the team is using this week. It was cruelty with a flight receipt. It was cruelty with a great-grandmother lying in a room while the woman who paid for the room told her own cousin she could not walk into it. And you cannot ESPY that away. Now let me answer the question I know is burning a hole in the comment section. Is the champ going to make weight for August 15th? Because the internet is convinced she is not. She is at 175 right now, needs to hit 160, and has just over a month to shave the pounds. I am going to tell you something the Yes Man choir will not. I think she makes it. I think she claws every ounce off, because she needs that purse more than anyone realizes. 3 million at signing sounds like generational money until you remember Papoose is in the picture, until you remember the WYNN Records overhead, until you remember the flights and the cars and the security detail and the discounted funeral, and yeah, until you remember Shalita's claim that a lot of that bag has already gone through Papoose's hands and out the door. So yes, she will probably make weight. But making weight is not the same as making it right. And right now, this champion has a whole lot of making right to do. And then there is the ESPY. Because let me tell you what the sports networks will not. The ESPYs are voted with a fan component. Fan opinions matter. And when your own sister goes live on Facebook the same month the ballots open, and your own cousin has already spent a year telling the internet you have been playing dirty at family funerals, that is not a fan favorite storyline. That is a repellent storyline. Claressa Shields' resume is undeniable. Her ring IQ is undeniable. But you cannot punch your way out of a public relations wildfire, and right now the wildfire has the Shields' last name burned right into it. Terrence Crawford is not dealing with a sister going scorched earth on a live stream. Gabriella Fundora is not dealing with a great-grandmother funeral scandal. Justin Gaethje is not dealing with a canceled flight and a suitcase on a curb. She is. And that is going to cost her votes she does not even know she needed. Look, I am not here to tell you how to vote. I am not here to tell you Claressa is not the greatest woman to ever throw a punch. She might be. In the ring, she almost certainly is. But the ESPYs are handed out at a black-tie dinner, and black-tie dinners come with a level of scrutiny that her team is not prepared for. The dresses will be photographed. The speeches will be transcribed. And every single word that ever came out of Briana's mouth on that live stream will be pulled up on someone's phone at that dinner. That is the algorithm of consequence, and it does not care about knockouts. Now let me pivot for a second because Remy Ma just dropped a snippet from a new video called Put Them On, and after the way Lil' Kim ate that Ever Since You Left Me remix, the entire women's rap ecosystem is on fire. The GWAT, who somehow has to have an opinion about every single women's rap release, sat this one out. And that silence tells you something too. Because if she had the energy to swing on Remy Ma's team last time, she has the energy to swing on Lil' Kim now. But she is quiet. Because she is on a cut. Because she is on a diet. Because she is dodging cameras. And because for once, Claressa is finding out that when the family goes public, the mic does not feel so good in your hand anymore. And here is the prediction I am going to leave you with, because if you have watched this channel long enough, you know I do not throw predictions around lightly. Within the next 30 days, one of two things is going to happen. Either Briana disappears from the internet the way people always seem to disappear when they get too loud around this family, and we all get a very rehearsed apology post that reads like a lawyer wrote it, or Shalita and Briana finally sit in the same room on the same live stream and unload every single thing they have been carrying for the last decade. If it is the first outcome, that tells you the money silenced the truth one more time. If it is the second, then buckle up because that live stream will be the single most watched boxing content of 2026, and it will have nothing to do with a title belt. Either way, this story is not over. Either way, the ring lights are getting brighter. And either way, Claressa is going to have to decide whether she wants a legacy that fits in a highlight reel or a legacy that fits in a family photo. She cannot have both. Not after this. Now with everything on the table, tell me, do you think she is going to make weight for Kaye Scott on August 15th? Do you think the champ deserves to win a second ESPY for Best Fighter over Terrence Crawford, Gabriella Fundora, and Justin Gaethje? What do you make of Papoose out here announcing WYNN Records as a network the same week his wife is being torched by her own blood? And most of all, when Briana finally sits down and tells the full story, do you think she survives it? Or do you think the mask is off for good? Drop those answers in the comments because I want to see them, and the community here is going to have some opinions you will not believe. If you rode this whole thing out with me, respect. Genuinely. This was a heavy one and you sat through it. Do me a favor and tap that like button one more time, because it puts this in front of every single person who has been asking why nobody is covering the Shield side of things honestly. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Turn on the bell too, because when Briana comes back for round 2 of this story, and she absolutely will, you do not want to be the one finding out about it 3 days late from a screenshot on Twitter. Right now, go check out the video I have pinned at the end screen because it lays out the full Papoose, WYNN Records, and Team Claressa financial picture, and once you see the numbers, everything you just heard is going to make 10 times more sense. The mask is off. And I will see you in the comments.